Well, after the initial stages here in turn 5, where the events, random and otherwise, have come into play, let's see what we've got. First of all, we had the normal troops coming in, and you can see there's quite big piles beginning to form up, like here even. These can't all necessarily move. Anywhere where there's an army, it can move at that size, but regular forces aren't going to be able to carry that many troops. Still, they help defend. We saw Ampudia. Yeah, Ampudia. He died, and that hurt political will for Mexico slightly. Scott came in with troops. Now he's here, which is kind of a shame because he's actually with Worth, who's a pretty good leader. But Scott's very good, and I wanted to give him flexibility to strike down. Also, the main effect of the events, both sides managed to get reinforcements, again adding to those troop totals. You can see, though, that there are a lot of raids by Indians into Mexico, and most particularly the first one was these two spaces. That's cutting supply off to this large army, which is going to cause a lot of, if there's a supply event, it's going to cause that army to cut in half, essentially, making their position difficult at best, unless I can get a supply wagon over there. If I can get a supply wagon, say here, that's maybe good enough. 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's good enough. So that I can, or even just a unit, so that I can protect that. I believe a unit protects through that. I know it does through revolt. Also, we have a revolt over here in Alta, California. I don't know if that's going to cause a problem for the U.S. troops. I got to look that up. I don't know what I can do about them. I don't have any leaders there, and I don't have any ability to take it over because it requires a force, and troops alone are not forces according to these definitions. I think there's a mistake there because it's very hard to get a leader over there. All right. And actually, next turn, you have the ability to dump these guys into the regroup box to get those troops back. Well, you kind of hope they did something first, but they can't take over Alta California even. I don't think that's how it's supposed to be, but that's how the rules read to me, at least. I gotta flip these things over because all these little markers are no longer in effect, and this was not in effect because of the bad weather in it a while ago. Alright, well, we're slowly seeing the U.S. beginning to push into northern Mexico. We'll see if they can make any headway there. And also whether or not there's cards. So, for example, there's the Scott Invades card. Who knows? That could be here. Oh, you know what? I forgot to roll for that blockade, I think, at the end of the turn. And I think that would have succeeded. I'm going to look that up too. So, the blockade effect is only during a supply event. And we've got one right now because the U.S. played the Commodore Connor card, and that would raise the blockade by 1. I actually did that already. I'm going to roll quickly to see if the blockade effect takes effect. Yeah, I know, I just rolled, but we didn't know. It does not, but what does happen is that supply event. And that supply event is going to affect this. It may end up affecting Alta California. I have to look to see whether or not they're in trouble there because it's in revolt. I'll come back after the effects. Well, some quick maneuvering. Scott crossed the Rio Grande here and has positioned himself in a place where he could strike either this space or this. Now, you see this huge stack here. That's Santa Anna has moved his army up to join the army that's been collecting there. Mainly this is as a counterpoise to Scott. Whatever Scott does, Santa Anna is threatening that position, and that kind of forces the U.S. to make different decisions than maybe they would have liked to. Where they would have liked to have used Scott maybe to crush this, well, that would open things up and allow a strike north that could endanger the supply situation somewhat. Not terribly, because Fort Brown is still going to be a supply source no matter what. and probably that's way too risky for Santa Anna to actually do. On the other hand, the other American options involve crossing the Rio Grande, so I really don't know what I can do other than what I planned, which is the march towards the coast. Well, let's explain what happened. Scott moved down and was in position here. He didn't see much safety, but rather than take the options I chose, he built a fortification there, entrenchments, breastworks, whatever. Now, Mexicans are kind of like, what? They played an Indian uprising, ended up getting a step loss over here in the disputed zone. Probably a mistake. Most of these events are kind of questionable, and that would have been much more useful moving Santa Anna or something like that. The cards are too valuable to waste on these little piddly things that just cause a step loss, I think. But anyway, and I'm usually one who conserves steps very, very carefully. So this is a tough game for me because they don't matter that much. Attrition is fairly common, and cards like that aren't that important. Anyway, Scott played the Scott Invades card, pulls himself from there. He didn't take the army marker with him. He could have. Gathered all the invading forces out of the cup. Powerful, powerful effect. Sails into Veracruz. He's got some 16 fire points. Mexicans only have 7 in defense the way I count it. I may be wrong, but I think this 2 is not just 2 steps, but also 2 strength points. And the fort adds the fortifications add the +5 fortress points. Rolled the effect, and the Mexicans got a brisk efficiency, whereas poor old Scott got execrable. 2 points to 1. Scott's been defeated on his invasion. This is his one shot. He's got to go back to New Orleans now with that force. He's no longer positioned up here where he was useful, and he's used up his trick card, as it were, his one trump to get into there. Really unlucky die roll. I wouldn't say anything else would have done as badly, but basically if he rolled anything but a 1, he was fine, because even a 2 would have put him up to the poor rating. Whereas with the Mexicans, yes, if they rolled less, it would have been a tie. But wow, totally destroys the campaign here at this point, essentially. Anyway, I'll take care of the losses, send Scott back on his way, and get the political will. This is a big bonus for the Mexicans. I think it's going to be tough to beat them now. Well, Santa Anna activated and smacked into Worth's force. Now, he had a little trump up his sleeve. His huge stack is no match for the U.S. forces in general. No matter how big you make it, the Mexicans just don't have the quality troops that they can commit to get the big firepower. But he had this morale loss card, and he actually got the successful roll. It was on a 0-3. Worth's committed troops didn't count extra. So he actually sacrificed some extra troops without getting a big bonus there. Still was a close battle. Both rolled poor efficiency, and the U.S. had higher total firepower. As you can see here, they ended up doing an extra point, getting the victory. And even though it was just a tiny victory, 3-2 losses, it's still 3 points of political will, because there were 2 armies involved, and it was a big force that lost. However, Worth was wounded in the battle, and there's no one to replace him. So the army's also removed. It can come back. Worth was only lightly wounded, so he'll come back with just draws from the leader pool. He doesn't have any effect there. It was sort of an attempt by Santa Anna to take advantage of a situation where the leadership had decreased a little bit, but it didn't quite work. He was hoping to push him over the river and maybe build a fort on the river and be able to really blockade the Rio Grande. Now, Scott is still able to invade. The Scott Invades card is gone, which is special, pulls lots of extra troops from the pool, and allows Scott to bring an army if he needs to. But this empty space down here, these can still be invaded, and he can threaten Mexico City, and that could probably force Santa Anna to come charging back and deal with him. I think it's likely to happen. It's just, it's very discouraging to see that good card, but maybe I wasted it by not sending an army down. I don't know. Anyway, we're back on the U.S. side. Well, after both sides took some replacements, Scott did it again. This time he fired off a 4-point card to get him the invasion. He used the naval bombardment card that he would have guaranteed a victory with in the last battle, but this time it didn't happen. And again, not a great roll for him, fine, but the Mexicans got the big 9 roll, which drove them up to the equivalent 2 points. It was a tie that drives Scott off, and the defender still holds at Veracruz. Another political will point for the Mexicans. And the U.S. is just not able to get that landing off. The last Mexican card is this little 2-pointer. I think they're going to launch an attack up here in Alta California and finish that off. See if they can win there. Nothing too exciting happened. A point for the raids. And that's really the end of the turn. We're going into the summer that comes before spring. I'll load this one up. It hasn't been an exciting, well, you know, there were Scott's 2 failures. That's really all that happened. A little bit of engagement up here. But now it's beginning to look like deadlock in northern Mexico. And if Scott can't make that landing and force someone to do something about it, I don't see how the North is going to crack. The actions up in Alta California weren't particularly decisive either. So, I don't know. Well, we'll see.